here. It's a different kind of presentation, and I haven't created a slick presentation exactly. It's kind of it's a topic I've been very interested in for a long time, as most of you know. How do these programs go together? And from the very beginning of my career as a choral person, that was an issue. But things have changed over time. I've got a lot more repertoire kind of under my belt and in my mind, and there's a hell of a lot more repertoire easily available now, and that makes a huge difference in in my life and in the life of Amanda and people like us, because when we go to look for music, it used to be you'd go to conferences and conventions, and you'd go to that down to the display floor where publishers were displaying their wares, and get single copies of things and then order them in multiple copies, and the range of stuff was much different. Now it's probably a little somewhat like that still in the case of modern music that's still under copyright, but in our case, almost all the music we do is the music itself is long out of copyright. So there's a vast amount available, as I've said before, in your pajamas. You can download an incredible amount of copyright-free stuff. So that's changed the game a lot. I still go to the library sometimes, books, and obviously I purchase music and CDs. But it's all in service of this idea of putting together a program. And the program is really, for us, is part of an 8-set season. And this is what we go through this upheaval every year, putting together a season. And we had a season more or less blocked out that would have been the season we're in now. But a few things from that have survived, but mostly not. We've kind of retooled. We're retooling for next season, and that has made me think of this because since New Year's, I've been deeply embroiled, probably before that, a couple of weeks before that, in putting together the programs. And normally my process is to put together everything that's needed for the brochure. Moira is our brochure person, and she sets the date, and damn it, everything has to be ready to hand over to her at that date. And that includes, of course, the concert titles and a description of the concert. And if you remember how our program looks, we have usually a nice image and a quote and a blurb and a title and the personnel, and that all of that stuff is what we need for the brochure. It doesn't necessarily require that every piece of music be in place. And in fact, there's often a very frantic time when I am taking it from that, which we've promised to our audiences to deliver, and rehearsals are going to start at X time. And that's when I often, make it so. Actually, I usually have a giant pile or a virtual pile of pieces of music, and I put it together with hopefully a little time to spare so Diana can copy the music and things like that. This is different because I have a lot more time. And it's been a real joy to me and a boon to me to be doing this because, as you know, our art that we do together kind of went away. And we're trying to do everything we can to do it virtually, but it's certainly not the same. And to work on a big project, or in this case, eight big projects that form our season, has been incredibly engrossing and rewarding, and at times frustrating, of course. And it makes me feel like I can do what I do, and I do it, of course, because I love it and because I have to. But I also do it for you, and for our audiences, and for our performers. And the idea is to create in each concert a special kind of experience, and it arises out of the flavor of that arises to some extent out of our mission statement. And I'm going to show you that. You probably are most of you are familiar with it. I'm going to show it to you and just read a few things because I want to. I can't share, Diana.
Try again. I just fixed it.
Got it. Okay, screen two. Hold on. Now, now I don't know what, it went so fast, I don't know if I shared sound, so I'm going to have to unshare and try it again. Let's see. Okay, so share sound and share screen too. Good. That was good. Okay, this, can you raise your hand if you can see this? I just want to confirm. So, yeah. Okay, this is the page from our most recent brochure, which was for last season. You all remember the season interruptus. Um, and I just want to read a few things. Sonoma Bach brings together and nurtures a community of music lovers in our beloved Sonoma region to share in the magnificent experience of early music. And that's really important to me, that it's a community. It's not a bunch of people who pay for tickets. What we aim for is to be a community of music lovers. Obviously, we love our Sonoma region and we're proud of it. And then the third leg there is the magnificent experience of early music. We know that this music from the distant past, sacred and worldly, vocal and instrumental, solemn and joyful, can speak powerfully to today's audiences. And we reach out not only to those already familiar, but also to those for whom the music is brand new. So that it sort of demonstrates the value that we put in this music. And of course, it's not all early music. It's not all made the same. And I think that one of the things I'm proud of with Sonoma Bach is that we do really good music and we put it together in interesting ways. And that really matters to me. And I think it has mattered to our audiences as well. Now, when we're programming, we obviously have to think about who. And we have, as you know, we have 3 vocal ensembles and a period instrument orchestra. And what? We do an annual series of 8 concert sets. And where do we do these things? We do them in the Schroeder Hall, and then a single set in St. Seraphim Church. And trying to describe that, because that matters too. That is a significant component of what we do together, is where we are. And then we talk a little bit about our education program, and then there's a question there that I think is really important, that I try to think about all the time. What does it all mean, and how can I connect? And the person that I have, person that I tend to have in my mind is not a musicologist, or not even necessarily a super experienced performer or a super experienced audience member. It's somebody like my brother John. My brother John lives in Sonoma County, and I've known him all his life. And he doesn't come to much that we do, but occasionally he comes. He came to our Pretorius show, and he really liked the Bachgrounder, and that touched me a lot, because as I say, I think about John a lot. Like, what would draw him in to a kind of music that he's not already interested in? What are the hooks? And that to me is really important, and it applies not only to someone like John, but also to plenty of other people maybe who are even interested in classical music, but not necessarily in early music. And that, to me, the purpose of the music goes way beyond something, in the musicological scientific field. It's about bringing people together. It's about love. It's about faith. It's about community. It's about so many things. And I think we all come to it for different reasons. But I think it's absolutely critical that when we put shows together, that we think about that we don't just put together a parade of hits or some big piece. Um, and this last part, we believe passionately in the power of music to bring people together, to help us work through life's challenges, and to serve as a catalyst for positive change. Now, all of those things are really important right now. They always are. We wrote this years ago, um, but they've never been as important as they are now, I think. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm feeling so acutely that there's something at stake, even more than usual, in putting this season together. That it's going to be so important that we um, celebrate that we're back, to whatever extent we are back, because we don't really know what the season is going to look like, but we've resolved to do it, even if it's partially, or even, God forbid, wholly virtual. We're going to bring musicians, bring singers and instrumentalists together in a room and make music. We might have to stream it. So as we come back together, of course, we're going to be happy that we're back together, but think about everything that's happened. Think about what we've lost and who we've lost and how many people we've lost. And we can't lose sight of that. In fact, to me, that's something that we can never lose sight of. We still have Veterans Day and Memorial Day, and we seem to be climbing towards 500,000 people lost. And I can't see a happy-go-lucky celebratory season. I just can't see it. And I don't mean a series of depressing programs, not by any means. Quite the contrary, really. But I think it's important that we mark and that we think about. Annie Laver used the term, we talked on the phone a couple of weeks ago, renewal, and that we mourn those we've lost and what we've lost. We celebrate coming back, and we find ways to renew, and maybe even, in the words of Biden, build back better, that maybe there's a way that Sonoma Bach can emerge from this stronger than we were before. All of those things are going into my thinking on all of this. Now, let me just turn for a second to some sort of basics about programming. When you think about programming, you tend to think about the pieces, that you're putting the pieces together. And the simplest kind of concert is one that we would have been doing this coming May/June, Bach's B minor Mass. Now, that's not a simple piece, nor is it simple to produce in any way, shape, or form. And there are millions of decisions you have to make as you put it together. But if you decide to do the piece, that's what you're doing. You've just programmed the concert in that sense. And so that's the sort of simplest version of programming, is choosing. Obviously, you have to choose within the capacities of your singers, of your instrumentalists, of your hall, of the audience. There's still lots to consider. But the symphony frequently does, let's say, 2 or 3 large works. And that is also programming, and they're supposed to complement each other, although diversity or even disparity seems sometimes to be the rule. Different conductors have their different choices or different parameters that they like to think about. Some people want things to go together and make a whole. Other people want to give someone something real snazzy, and then something really thoughtful, and then something, in other words, a diverse array of pieces. And of course, we've done plenty of programs like that, usually within a theme. One that comes to mind is our Bach and Handel 1707 that we did a number of years ago with the Santa Rosa Symphony, in which we did 4 works by those composers when they were 22 years old, writing fabulous music. But there's plenty of examples of that. We do a fair amount of concerts like that. Our Handel concert that we were going to be doing at the end of last season, the one that was truncated, was an example of that. That was also Handel 1707. And that's an example of what I call a deep dive, when we dig down into a single composer, which is yet another kind of programming. But something that Sonoma Bach has done a lot, and especially lately, and has become, I think, pretty good at, is putting together what you might call a gallery. In fact, I want to talk a little bit about art curating. I have a book here called Art as Therapy, and it's got some beautiful art in it. And Moira, you would love this book, I think, if you don't already know it. But it's got all this art, and it's based around themes like love and life, and the author, working with a museum curator, is basically trying to dig under the surface of art curation in museums. Our typical experience is you walk into a room, there's a bunch of pictures, and each one has a little card. And maybe it's a themed room, so maybe there's a big card when you walk in and you get to read that. And that's usually it. Maybe you wear those headphone things. I personally don't like to wear those things, so I don't use them, but I've heard some people really love them. But anyway, it's fairly minimal information that you're given. And for some people that works really fine, and they don't want more than that. And maybe they already have a lot in their head, or maybe they studied up before they came. But plenty of people miss a lot. And what I like to think of is a situation where you go to a museum, but you're with a friend, a dear friend that you love, but someone who knows a lot about this stuff and loves to share. And you kind of go tugged by the hand, oh, check this out. And the person's enthusiastic and they fill in some of the background and ask you how this makes you feel. And you just have this experience where you get drawn in to the art to which you're being exposed. That's kind of the way I like to think about a Sonoma Bach concert, that we don't shun people who don't know stuff, but we kind of prize them and say, okay, here's a thread, here's another golden thread, here's a little thing that you can relate to. Yes, this person was born 400 years ago, but here's some themes that he or she was dealing with that we're dealing with too, all at the same time. So all these things are going in. But think about it, when you put together a concert that has 25 pieces in it, 25 separate pieces of music in it, now you've got a different kind of challenge from the single work or the couple of large works. Now you've got to figure out what order to put them in. Now you've got to figure out what is the experience of one piece, or how is the experience of one piece altered by having just heard the piece before. How does a given piece prepare you to hear and accept and take in the next piece? And it's not a science, it's an art. And it'll always be somewhat subjective, obviously. And a very clear example of this is you don't want to program 6 slow, terrible, boring pieces all in a row. I mean, obviously, we don't want to program any terrible, boring pieces. But, let's say even beautiful pieces, if they're all about, if they're all about death, or they're all about depression, or, loss or whatever, it's going to be hard, right? And similarly, too many bright, happy pieces start to get you feeling too kind of smiley face about the whole thing. So a very basic element, which of course rock bands and everybody else follows, is that you tend to intermix ballads or slower songs or more deep, meaningful songs with lighter songs. But that's not always appropriate. I mean, that's a very kind of coarse sieve to push the music through. What you really want to think about is, what is the audience's experience going to be as you go along? Now, we can structure all these pieces in a lot of different kinds of ways. You could do a straight, if the pieces are varied over periods, you could do a straight chronological. You could do a chunk on one composer and a chunk on another composer and a chunk on another composer. You could, there's all kinds of ways of structuring, and that has become, thinking about ways of structuring programs has become really important to me, because what you don't really want is just kind of a series of undifferentiated pieces. You probably noticed that we, and many other groups too, of course, in programming a concert of this character with many smaller works, that it's usually not presented as just an assemblage of single work, single work, single work. They're usually grouped together. And there's a really good reason for that, because that, by grouping together in sensible ways, you don't want to force against the grain, but if you can program in such a way that let's say 3 pieces have something connected to each other. Maybe they're by the same composer, but maybe not. Maybe they're on the same topic, but maybe they're different takes on the same topic. Because, a given topic in a secular concert, let's say Love Gone Awry, of which there are plenty of songs. No two of them are the same. No two bad breakups are the same too, I'm sure. And people and the poet and the composer of each piece has his or her own response to this situation, and is giving you something hopefully unique to them, an absolutely personal response. And so by putting a couple of these things together that somehow relate in various parameters, it allows us to live in a little space, and then live in a little space, and then live in a little space. And in a sense, that helps combine multiple pieces, and then you can relate those groups to each other, if that makes any sense. Now, it's getting a little abstract here, and so what I'm going to do as I continue to talk about how to program is show you the programs that are finished. And of our 8 concert sets next season, 5 of the programs are currently finished. And when I say finished, not to the sense to the step of we could do a brochure. I'm saying the repertoire is all selected and put in order. Um, and so we can see a couple of these as they're actually taking shape in real time. So I'm going to start by showing you a spreadsheet for our opening concert of the season. It is called Lux Perpetua, and it is the concert that we would have been performing um, in this season, the current season that is actually ended up our virtual season. It would have been our Saint Seraphim concert, so that would have been next month in March. And it's pretty much unchanged since then because it seemed to me important that we begin our season by acknowledging the loss that our nation and the world and many of us individually and our choirs personally as well have undergone in this terrible period. And the concert, because we were only 2 weeks out from our performances in March, the concert can be reassembled. Obviously, we'll have to do lots of rehearsal. Now, this concert is one that's built around a liturgical kind of reconstruction. It features Tomás Luis de Victoria's Officium Defunctorum, or Requiem, Mass, for 6 voices, and therefore it is kind of a large work. But Victoria doesn't give us, A, he doesn't give us all of the liturgical items, and B, he doesn't give us enough enough music for an entire concert. And so what I've done here is I've taken Victoria's music, and you can see how many under the composer, almost all of the Victorias down there are from his Requiem. We're indeed doing all of the movements from his Requiem. But we're also doing other music that serves a couple of functions. One, it fills in liturgical items that Victoria didn't provide. And 2, I've put in what we call substitutions, which go in the place of the long readings that would have happened or would have been chanted. And we've done, as many of you know, liturgical reconstructions with those long readings. But it seems to me that printing those words in the program and then putting another musical piece, as was sometimes done back then, makes more sense for a concert. And so this concert was relatively easy to put together, although it did take several weeks for me to find exactly the right motets. Also, something that you maybe don't think about is that key flow makes a big difference, and there's something that I didn't happen to put the keys in, but you'll see them in some of the other spreadsheets because you really don't want a bunch of pieces together in the exact same key. Because it gets a little bit boring, but at the same time, you don't want to stab back and forth around like popcorn. And so some of these pieces I've transposed in order to fit in with this context. So that's kind of possibility number 1 is to choose a pre-existing form, which in this case is the liturgical form, and adapt your repertoire around that. Now, one of the songs here, I thought it would be fun to sing a song or listen if you want to just listen from each of these concerts. And one of the ones that I discovered here in this concert is one of my new favorite motets. And most of you know that I'm constantly coming up with new favorite motets. And it is, let me find it here in my folder. Let me pull that up here. And it's called Audivi Vocem de Cielo. And many of you know the wonderful Schutzmotet, Selig sind die Toten, die in dem Herrn sterben. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord. This comes from that same passage from the book of Revelations, but it includes the line previous to that, Audivi vocem in cielo dicentem mihi, I heard a voice in heaven saying to me, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord. This is by Duarte Lobo. And Duarte Lobo is a composer new to me. He is a Portuguese composer, and there's a number of Spanish composers in here as well, Cardoso and Guerrero, as well as Victoria. So they all kind of go into an Iberian file folder. Let's see. I'm going to get that ready, and now I'm going to pull up my. Now, where is it? Here we go. Boop, boop. Okay, this is the old scrolling score trick. And feel free to sing along or just listen and enjoy. Take any line you want. And here we go. Whoops. Absolutely amazing piece, and filled with what I know you heard and felt is what I call the Spanish cosmic style. I mean, that it's something about six voices for one thing, but also there's something about if you've ever been to Spain and some of those churches and cathedrals and chapels, and it's often quite dark and just I don't know, you can sort of feel the spirituality in the air. And there's something about that's the Spanish 16th century style that is really like that. That concert, I believe, is going to be in the Church of Saint Seraphim. That's not what we usually do with our opening concert of the season, but it seems to me that the sextet in that hall for this concert is the right thing to do. And so we'll see. I think Diana's got it reserved both ways at the moment, but we'll see how it goes. And of course, as I said, we don't know how many audience members are going to be able to come to any of this, but we're just going to go forward and do something. Now I'm going to show you another concert. Our next concert in the season will be our traditional slot just before Thanksgiving. And this is called World of Wonders. And World of Wonders is music of the Stilus Fantasticus, 17th century, Italy, Germany. We're going to be focusing mostly on Germany and also a bit on Austria. It's an incredible style. If you're not familiar with it, come to the concert and or send me an email and I'll shoot you some tracks. This one is a different kind of structure. We don't have the built-in liturgical structure to work with. So if you take a look at this spreadsheet, you'll see set one, and then you'll notice, or you might notice, that there's an alternation between instrumental pieces, the sonatas, the chaconne, the serenata, and vocal pieces. In our opening recital, which this more or less is, even though it's our second concert, we always feature Chris Fritchie, and usually we feature the consort, but because the consort's doing the October set, the Victoria, we're having a duet of singers, Diana Morgan and Chris Fritchie. And they'll be doing solos and duets. So this is a fairly simple approach by which I break up the instrumental and vocal pieces by interleaving them with each other. And it looks, under the Serenata con altre arie by Schmelzer, it looks like there's a whole bunch of pieces. That's actually one piece. Those are the separate movements of a single fantastic piece, kind of mischievous and goofy. The style is fantastic, and it's often compared with the old style of, I got one book right here called Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonder. There was a tradition many of you know about. Some of you probably were exposed to snippets of it yourself. For example, my stepmother was really into butterflies, and so she had a butterfly collection, and there was a whole room called the butterfly room that had these display cases with dead butterflies, and it was a thing. And that approach, that idea of bringing nature in, unfortunately dead, but bringing nature into the home and making it be available was a huge element of the let's say 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. Rich people would often have a whole room devoted. It could be a room of wonder, or sometimes it was called the Wunderkammer, the cabinet of wonder, and not just natural items, but all kinds of crazy, unusual things. And that's the term Wunderkammer is used about this wonderful music. So it's fun to program. This is also, I want to say something else about this, which is that I'm a super lucky person when I get to do this stuff, because I've heard some of this music, but I'm not an expert at that. You all know that I'm more of a specialist at choral music. And so to program a concert like this, which I've been doing now for, I think 6 years, I've been programming the opening recital and sometimes other concerts as well, is a huge gift to me. Because what I do is I listen, make notes, post-its. I'm not as systematic as I should be, so there's little scraps of paper all over the place and in my notebook of pieces that just turn me on and that I just really want to put in somewhere. And so then when we decided to do this concert, it was like hog heaven. And there's so much great vocal music that uses this big string sound. Notice under the instrumentation, 5 strings plus continuo, 6 strings plus continuo, many pieces with five or six strings. That is a big orchestra, and we're probably going to end up, as we did last year in our English recital, with a mixed, or what's called a broken consort, of a couple of violins and then viols for the bottom of the orchestra. It should be pretty great. So many great things to talk about and to look at here, and so many great composers as well. Most of them probably aren't familiar to you. I'm sure most of you know of Buxtehude, and some of you will remember Hammerschmidt, which we've done a couple of Hammerschmidt pieces over the years. But an example of a person that I didn't know, but I discovered this piece almost randomly. It almost fell off the shelf. The volume almost fell off the shelf and hit me on the foot. Is this piece that we're going to sing now. It's called Wie schön leuchtet der Morgenstern, and it might as well have been written for Diana Morgan, although she wasn't around when Christian Geist was around. We're going to open the second set with this wonderful piece. Go back to my, here we go, nice and big. Fun as that is, I'm not going to play the second verse, which is the same music over again, just because, in the interest of time, it's really such a joyful, incredible piece, and a lot of the music from that set is of that character. Something else I wanted to mention is the order in which we put things. I normally drive in the car a lot, so I usually listen in the car, though lately I haven't been as quite as much. And I listen, and I put together set lists when I'm thinking about this. When I'm working it out, I put together set lists and put the music in that order, and then listen to it in the car in that order. And you know, I come up with an idea. Like in this case, I was alternating vocal and instrumental pieces, so that provided some structure. But still, which vocal instrumental pieces went together, and how, you know, exactly what order. And usually, I change things many times before I get something that really feels to flow in the right way. And it's funny, it's really hard to put your fingers on what makes that. Sometimes it's obvious, and a piece flows one to the other nicely, maybe because of key or because of tempo or because of one piece has been very slow and now we get you know, something brighter or whatever. There's so many reasons, but some of it seems kind of wooga wooga almost, like it's hard to define exactly what makes it good, but you know when it's right. You know what I mean? You know when it's right. And then it's really fun to see how that plays out in real life. That's one of the greatest joys about doing this, is that it's not just an academic exercise, but you get to rehearse it for months in some cases, and then see how it plays, actually plays on the stage. So you kind of learn bit by bit as you go forward. And speaking of going forward, now we're going to go on to the Christmas concert, our early music Christmas, which I believe this is our ninth one. Um, it's going to be called, well, I don't quite have a title for it. The working title is The New Oxford Book of Carols. And speaking about a different way of structuring a concert, I've never done this before, um, but don't worry, no one's going to get hurt. Um, there is, and I didn't discover it, but I've had for many years in my collection behind me um, of a whole lot of Christmas Carol books, including the Oxford Book of Carols. But I didn't realize until a year or so ago that that a new version has superseded that. I should have known, but I didn't. Anyway, so I got the new Oxford Book of Carols, which is a completely different book, really, and um, and it's truly awesome. It's absolutely wonderful. There's a really great um, long introduction about carols, and the book doesn't just cover what we think of as deck the hall and all of that. As a matter of fact, it doesn't have jingle bells. It doesn't have any of those kind of songs in it. It's got lots of light songs, um, but it's structured in a beautiful way and includes many of the pieces that we already know and love from early music, including pieces songs from the German tradition, like the one you just heard, for example, or Von Himmel hoch, for another example, in Dulce Jubilo, Resonant and Laudibus. All of those well-loved songs are in there, but also obviously lots of English stuff, but it becomes very international. And I decided, and this is a little stretch for us, something we've never done before, believe it or not. So there's actually going to be some audience participation in our early music Christmas for the first time. Each of these sets that you see, there are 6 sets of 5 songs, ends with a carol slash sing along in a fairly straightforward arrangement directly from the New Oxford Book of Carols, and we'll do 2 or 3 verses depending on which one. All the other stuff is normal performance stuff, but it ranges a lot, and it's more or less put in the order in which the pieces appear in the New Oxford Book of Carols. Now, I didn't get lazy on this. There are, as I said, the carols that we're singing with the audience are mostly drawn from the New Oxford Book of Carols. I use the New Oxford Book of Carols as a jumping off point for finding arrangements that I liked. Some of the arrangements that I liked were in there, but plenty of the other ones weren't. As an example, Veni Veni Emmanuel, the third piece, is a fabulous modern piece arranged by one of the King singers that is kind of neo-medieval, I would call it. And as you can see, if you go down, some familiar names like Michael Pretorius and Vaughan Williams, and Leonard Schroeder and Johann Krüger, and it's a lot of the kind of usual Sonoma Bach suspects are in there. Not quite the same arrangement, but it's sort of in the spirit. I like to think that David Wilcox would be pleased to hear this concert, and it sort of gave me a structure. And I think it'll be nice. The carols, the sing-along carols, will kind of break up the concert, and again, you see this grouping. Now, when you're doing this kind of thing, you always discover your new favorite composer and your new favorite piece. And I'm going to share 2 pieces from this concert with you because I discovered my new favorite composer and separately my new favorite piece. The first one is an arrangement of Resonant in Laudibus, which is one of the ancient songs, first came to light for many people in the 1582 Pie Canciones, circa last early music Christmas, the last one that happened, 2019, did a lot of songs from Pie Canciones. In Dulce Jubilo is in there, Resonant Laudibus, Der Tag ist so freudenreich, it's even Good King Wenceslas, not with those words, but Good King Wenceslas comes from Pie Canciones. We know this says, Christ was born on Christmas Day, read the holly twine the ray. That's the English carol that was based upon it. This is the original Latin word by a fellow named Pekil. And if anybody knows any more about Polish than I do, they'll probably be able to correct my pronunciation. Let me pull up the score for you. let's see, get rid of that. Here it is, right there. And it's not just the composer who's terrific, and he has lots of music out there. Like, how did I never even heard of him. Um, but also the particular ensemble that pulls this piece off. So I couldn't resist programming into the concert. Here we go. Ah, sorry. Wait. Ah, sorry. Turns out if I press the page down, but I just was in the playing back thing, it fucks everything up. Sorry. That will never happen again. I'd like to express my deep embarrassment. Here we go. No, got to go back here. Sorry. There we go. Gotta love it. You just gotta love it. Now this piece I discovered from a CD called by a group called Singer Pur or Pure Singer. I think there's 6 of them, though they expand and contract depending upon the piece. And I wish the hell I had thought of this theme, and maybe I'll steal it someday. The CD is called Adventskalender. So it's an Advent calendar. There are 24, how many, 25 pieces, I guess. How many, is it 24 little doors you open in an Advent calendar or 25? I think it's 24 or 25. Anyway, that's how many pieces there are in this show. And they're not all Advent. Some of them are Christmas. This one, I'd never heard this song, and I'd certainly never heard this arrangement. It is apparently, maybe Andrea knows more about this than I do. It's a traditional song around Christmas, although it's not actually a Christmas song. Um, it is just a little poem. Oh, you calm time, come far over the mountains and over the mountains wide. Good night. In the loneliness, it rustles us gently over the mountains wide, over the mountains far. Good night. amazing piece. I hope you liked it. The first time I heard it, I was on the stair stepper, and I, I was like, "What is that?" And I stopped, and I kind of was like all huffed, and I played it like 5 times in a row. I was basically weeping. I don't know why. Sometimes a simple piece like that will really do it. Just somehow crystallizes it. And as some of you know, I enjoy. I mean, we're an early music organization, and I'm obviously an early music nut. But sometimes people in writing modern music look back in such a way, or connect back in such a way that that feels absolutely appropriate. As a couple of years ago, we did a lot of Whistler, for example, or Brahms is another great example, very different, but a great example of resonates with what we do. The next concert that I have programmed is our Seraphim concert for March of 2022. Believe it or not. Let me change out the spreadsheet here and show you where I went with that one. It's called Book of Hours, and I originally was planning to put together a concert. It's not at the top. Which was inspired by the Très Riche, the early 15th century illuminated Book of Hours. And it's going to still be a part of it, but what the original idea was that it was going to be a completely mixed concoction of all these motets and songs that related to all the different stories that are told in visual way and also in text in the Book of Hours. But I got pulled and pulled and pulled towards Palestrina for some reason. Sonoma Bach has never done a deep dive into Palestrina. And it just started to feel right. So I started looking into it, and I found that I discovered something I did not know about Palestrina, was that he wrote two, not one, but two books of pieces of music that go around the liturgical year. A book of offertories, and you see all those offertories there, and a book of hymns for all festivals, special events in the church around the church year, and that got me interested. One of the offertory book is quite late. It was published in I think it was 1593, the year before he died, and it is fantastic. There's short motets for offertories. So they're not full on like 5-minute motets. They tend to be, you can see the timings down there. Most of them are 2.5 minutes or so. And so what I did was I put together, you can see the dates there. I started with an Advent offertory and ended down near the bottom November 1st, which is All Saints Day. And some of them are hymns as well. Hymns are a little bit longer, and they include chant, so they kind of break it up in an interesting way. And then in italics, you see the Missa all'Armè of Palestrina. We did one movement from that about 3 years ago when we did our Roman concert. And that concert was very much focused on the L'Armè. Those of you who don't know, the L'Armè was kind of a pop song from the 15th century. It starts Loma, Loma, L'Armè, L'Armè. And it's pretty snappy. And you wonder, well, why does somebody write a mass based upon that tune? Well, it wasn't just somebody. It was about 45 people that we know of wrote masses based on the L'Armè. Josquin wrote 2, and so did Palestrina write 2. But we did only the Agnus from that. It was such an incredible piece, and we're going to sing it together right now. But it's such an incredible piece that I said, okay, this is the mass, because if you're doing Palestrina, you have to do a mass, but you can't take up the whole program with the mass. So what I did was I left the credo out, and because this is not a church service, and you see there's 3 motets of the going around the church year, and then there's the Missa all'Armè Kyrie, 3 motets continuing around the church year, Missa all'Armè Kyrie, Gloria. So there's a kind of it helps to create several levels of structure as we go through the piece, and it ends with that incredible Agnus Dei. And also at the bottom of each set, we're doing one of the famous pieces. The 2 most famous motets by Palestrina are Sicut Cervus and Tu es Petrus, and so I couldn't resist those. And weirdly, I've never done either one of them. let me set up here for the Gloria. I mean for the Agnus, and you'll see what I mean. That this to me partakes of that Spanish cosmic nature. And the tune, by the way, is there. You see that really long tenor note, the tied together Agnus day. And so here, remember I told you da da dee 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 dee. So here's the G, G, C, C, B, A, G, Lo mar me, do, do, do. So it's stretched out an impossible amount. How can you write beautiful music over that? That's just too crazy. But guess what? Here we go. If anybody ever tells you Palestrina doesn't have soul, play that piece for them. He's an amazing composer. In a way, he's kind of a victim of his own success. Became sort of the standard of Renaissance polyphony, and it was always, the peak of perfection. And I don't know, it's a pretty high bar. There's so much beautiful music in that concert. I'm really, really looking forward to that one. And now we'll zip to the last concert of the season. And you remember I told you that I wanted to start the the season with a requiem, and I wanted to end the season with something like a requiem, with something that kind of circled back and honored the spirit. And by the way, all of the concerts are going to have a dedication at the beginning and a short piece, a short dedicatory piece at the beginning, except for the first concert, which of course is all dedication. But this one I wanted to be very different. It's our slot where we normally have a larger orchestra and sometimes soloists, It's where we would have been doing the B minor Mass in a few months, that final slot of the season. Um, and so I went at it. This was a labor of love, still is. There's actually a bunch of details. You can see all those transcriptions that I still have to do, etc. But it's all in place now. Here's the focus. It's kind of it's a little bit like the very first concert of the season where I told you that I took the Requiem Mass as a kind of structure and hung different liturgical pieces and a few other pieces in and around that. This is a bit like that, except for I introduce a different element. You can see up here the Requiem. These are the movements from the Requiem, the Requiem Aeternam, the classic movements that are set up on the Requiem Aeternam, the Kyrie, the Gradual, the Offertory, Sanctus Benedictus, Agnus Dei, and the Communion. The only one that's missing from, let's say, people who know the Mozart Requiem is the sequence Dies Irae, and that's not always set. Some of the composers have, and in fact, we're going to be doing Duarte Lobo's sequence in the first concert of the season. But look at all this other stuff that's around it, and you'll see. Many of you know this might not know the name, but certainly you all know the tune. The Passion Chorale. So that's one of the chorales that I'm interleaving here, and you can see it appears here, it appears here, and it appears here. And these chorales separate the liturgical items, which are in Latin. The chorales are in German. The second chorale is Jesu meine Freude. Jesu meine Freude, meines Herzens Weide. And we have three of those too, in three different settings. One here, and one here. And so it's an alternation of liturgical items in Latin and then these chorales, which are very apropos. I'm selecting the verses. In the case of Befehl du deine Wege, you have, I think it's 6 different chorale texts that were based upon the same tune, and some of them have as many as 15 verses. So I only get 3 verses to choose from, but there's plenty of verses to say just what needs to be said in each little slot. You'll also notice an interesting variety of composers. Duruflé, 20th century composer. Carol, 17th century composer. Duarte Lobo, 16th century composer. And then Carol, Lobo, Carol, Duruflé. So that's a symmetrical structure, which I also kind of built into that. The second set, rather than being Requiem related, is related to the service of Compline, which is the last daily service in the series of what's called hours in the monastic tradition. Compline, or it's called evensong in the English tradition, although that's actually a combination of Vespers and Compline. And it's a beautiful service. It's so many wonderful texts to deal with. Here I used a beloved chorale of a different type. Herzlich lieb habe ich dir, O Herr, and this is the one many of you know from the St. John Passion. It's the final chorale. Which definitely brings a tear right to my eye. We're not doing Bach, though. For that, we're doing, as you can see, Pretorius. Right here, I'm playing around. This one here, I'm playing around with. I already transcribed a Hammersmith 6 voice, but I'm going to transcribe this Pretorius 8 voice, which I think might be just the right one for that slot. And then there's this incredible Buxtehude. It's the third movement of a cantata that he wrote, which is just so beautiful and perfect for the slot. And then you see the various slots of the Latin from the Compline, and a couple of instrumental interludes. This is also symmetrically structured around the center. but including those liturgical items. And then this is just an idea at the time, but I'm thinking if if people want an encore, that we do the In Paradisum from the Requiem, which many of you know is also a part of Requiems. It's a part of the Duruflé. It's part of on Rudder's Requiem, etc. So one of the composers I discovered, I mean, Machicoor I've heard of, but never done anything. Shepherd I've known of and listened to his pieces, but never done anything. Christoph Bernhard, I've done a few motets by him. De Grenzi. This is having to seek out these liturgical items for a mixed program is really a great opportunity because you have to do text searches and you go through a massive. I mean, some of these titles I went through at least closely looked at 20 or 30 choices and to see if they were good pieces and B whether they fit into the slot. But anyway, one of the pieces that I discovered that I really like is this mass. It's a Missa Brevis based on a Martin Luther chorale called Christ unser Herr zum Jordan kam, and it's a five voice piece, and there's so much beautiful music that I could have played here, but for some reason this is the one that I want to close with, and I hope you really enjoy this piece. Here is the PDF, and yeah. It's better if you know the chorale. This isn't one of the best known chorales, but it's a really wonderful melody. It was one of our Bach chorale projects several months ago. So I hope you enjoy this piece. Here we go. What do you think of that? Isn't that amazing? I mean, by a composer almost no one's heard. Raise your hand if you know all about Christoph Bernard. I knew the name, and we did, I think, two motet. Only we did one or two motet, or maybe they were madrigals by him. But that's it. And when I heard that, I mean, of course, the performance is fantastic. But the last thing I want to say about that set is I thought it was really important to try to build. Let's see, we're going to be in a different place. You know, we start our season in October, we ended in May, at the end of May. But it's hard to know. I mean, it seems to me that we're going to be um, still needing to acknowledge, you know, what has happened, but we're also going to be needing to move forward as we need to now. I mean, both have to be part. And so, especially in the flow of that concert, and given the two liturgical structures that I was working with, the Requiem and the Compline, I try to make a lift, like to send us out with a sense of hope and love and potential and renewal. So there you go. That's as far as we've gotten so far. I'm working with Annie on she's going to mostly be programming the organ recital, which will not include the Bach choir because we're trying to put off getting large groups together until a little bit later on in the season. But we'll include Chris and Diana, and then there's another couple of concerts still to program for me besides that. Anyway, that's a kind of a bird's eye view, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Bob.
Thank you.
There's some really great music in there to look forward to.
Yeah, there's a lot of great music in the one of the things that's so fun for me. Like right now, I have 5 CDs that are filled with this stuff, and whenever I drive, I want to listen to this one, or I want to check that one out, or still make tinkering a little bit, but mainly it's just like wow. And we get to perform all that stuff, like people make up playlists just to make cool playlists, and that's actually what I get to do. It's like it's what I do. So it's what choir directors do and conductors do. So it's really, but to think of us actually taking all that stuff and turning them into concerts is just I just can hardly wait to be back with you all and playing and singing and listening and doing what we do.
Bob, I did have one question come up in the chat during our time here, and it had to do with that magical little piece in the early music Christmas. I think it's O du stille Zeit, but who's the composer of that?
Oh, it was the song was written by a guy named Bresgen, Bresgen. And the arrangement, if you wait just a second, I think I could come up with the arrangement. I have to change my season, early music Christmas, scores. Here, look at me. Look how organized I am. My God, what happened?
Well done, well done.
And you can't still see it. Yeah, the melody is by Cesar Bresgen, and the setting by Marcus, Marcus Schmidl, Schmidl. Marcus Schmidl.
Of course.
Of course, it had to be by him.
All right, I just put that into the chat for Julie, just so you have it there, and if you need some spelling or whatever, it's in there. And so we finished this part, so I just want to make sure that if anybody else has a question they'd like to ask or something they'd like to say, that you have an opportunity to unmute yourself now, or forever hold your peace or whatever, but unmute yourself and say hello, or if you have something you'd like to ask, then we're here for that.
I have a question, Bob. I'm really curious about keys. Like what kind of keys go well with each other, and which ones don't when you select pieces?
Well, I have favorite. Got a little echo going. I have favorite. Somebody's echoing. I have favorite.
Did I find it?
Connections. Yeah, you did. Okay. I have favorite connections. I mean, an obvious case is same key to same key. A different effect is same key, major to minor or minor to major, and that can be beautiful. Circle of fifths is wonderful and works really, really well. Um, Third relationships are sometimes really nice because like a D major piece that leads to a B flat piece where you just kind of the bottom drops out and it gives a whole different range are nice. And it could the same way going up. The C major piece to an E major piece is like, whoa, everyone sits up in their chair just about when they do it. So uh, step step relationships, like just do a piece and then do a piece a whole step higher, are less interesting to me. I often, if I can, I often transpose one of the pieces if it doesn't wreck the piece, if there's a possibility of doing that. So they're in the same key, or maybe, depending on what I'm doing, maybe a minor third apart. It just, except that sometimes if you're near the end of a program, going up a step, not a half step because that's just too cheesy, but what was that gospel singer Mariah Carey? That kind of, at the end they always bump up by a half, then they bump up by another half. It's just too cheap. But it's fine for that style, but it just doesn't work for early music by any means. Besides, with early music, we're generally, certainly when we're with instruments, we're generally limited by the keys we can be in. Like we can't go from G to G flat major because G flat major is not it's a terrible key to play in with their instruments. So yeah, there's a few ideas for you. It and then on the large scale, it's nice to have it work out where not that maybe Will Johnson or somebody would hear that you started a set and ended a set in the same key, but I don't really think about that. When it works out that way, I think, oh, that's cool, aren't I brilliant? But usually it's just a kind of an accident. It's a good question.
Anybody else want to jump in with any questions? You can unmute yourself. Bob, we were wondering who the author of the Art as Therapy book is.
Oh yeah, this is a guy named Alain de Botton.
Of course, again.
Alain, and then de, or de, and Botton with Botton. Art as Therapy. I really like this book. I read it on an airplane coming back. I bought it in an art store in Manhattan and read it on the airplane coming back, and it gave me a lot of one of the images from it that I take away is old Goethe standing at the window. Does anybody remember that? We used it in something.
A Room with a View.
Yeah,
that was
exactly.
The concert.
He's looking out the window, and the quote that Botton came up with for that is Goethe said when he came to Italy, it felt like the whole previous part of his life had been like a whaling expedition to Greenland. Just think of a German, like a cold country European coming to Italy. You got the food, you got the wine, women, and song, and you got the scenery and the architecture and the mosaics and the Venice, and it's like everything else. Anyway, so I can't find it, but there's a great picture of him looking out the window in Rome when he was in Rome, with this kind of, he's like got pajamas on basically. And it's a beautiful sketch, and he's just like looking out at Roman life, and he's just so excited and alive. It's really great. Anyway, I love the book. It got panned by some art critics, but I mean, you guys know art critics. Sometimes they have no sense of humor at all, for one thing. And anyway, but I learned a lot from it. It's a good book, and I think about lots of the things that he says in terms of music. Kind of take some of his ideas and think about music.
Cool. Okay, is there anybody else here that would like to ask any questions, or you can always send us an email too if there's something that comes up later.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for coming and listening. I hope it was interesting. It's certainly, as you can tell, it's certainly something I'm thrilled about, and it's such an honor and pleasure to be able to do it and to be able to share it with people like you.
I have Moira on for a question or a comment, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I was trying to type as quickly as I could before you stopped. So I'm curious, it's really hard to figure out how people are going to feel after this is all over. And I had been reading about how after the 1919 pandemic, we had the roaring 20s and everybody kind of went crazy. And, you know, do you feel like that's going to happen again? Or, I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but.
What I'm actually afraid of is that everybody will go crazy, but it won't be over.
Right.
And
right.
that the going crazy will make it drag on and on. But I try not to think about too much, to think about that too much. But that is some. But no, I have no crystal ball. Diana has no crystal ball. We got our board and a few other people together to talk over. Should we just go for the season? And we decided to do it. But we're going to have to be really flexible, obviously, and do the best we can.
Luckily, we've had some practice being flexible,
Yeah.
so we're ready to go, and we're looking forward to learning some new skills and trying some new ways of presenting our concerts so that they're more readily available for everyone. And so we'll learn and we'll grow and we'll try to, you know, do everything that we can to be our best selves next year and be able to present real life music with all of our people. So that's what we're really looking forward to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, good. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right.
Sending lots of love your way.
Thanks so much, Bob, for such a fun night. It's so good to spend time with you and talk to you about our season. We're looking forward to getting back together. So hope is on the horizon.
All right, everybody.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.